17 years old. And when I was a junior in college, I handed out circulars door to door. College student needs work. I grew that business from a one-person handyman, me, to actually employ over 1,000 people. Electrical, mechanical, plumbing, pipe fitting, architects, engineers. I sold that business in 1999. Nobody lost their job. That business is doing better than ever. And it allows me to have a full-time unpaid job running for President of the United States. I also want you to know that I am an athlete. I'm an athlete, bit of an oxymoron at 59 years old that I'm a competitive athlete, but I am, and I think it's important. My athletics has taught me that life is a journey, it's not a destination. You have to enjoy what you do every single day. I enjoy what I do every single day, and if there's any bit of advice that I could give any one of you, if you're not enjoying what you do, quit, and tomorrow start out doing what it is that you want to do, because life is pretty short. But in the context of athletics, I have a goal to climb the highest mountain on each continent. I had the good fortune to climb Mount Everest. About 6 weeks before I left for Mount Everest, I broke my leg. I left for Nepal with a broken leg, believing that it would heal by the time summit day rolled around, and it did. But I'm pointing this out to tell you all that the person you're listening to right now has no quit. There is no quit. It is a journey, and I enjoy what I do, and I really think that all of us are making a difference. That's the other thing I want to point out here too, is I also recognize that if given the opportunity, every single one of you would be taking the opportunity that I have. And so I'm trying to make the most out of it, and I'm trying to speak on behalf of all of us. Back to Mount Everest. Occasionally people say, oh, you conquered Mount Everest. Know this about me. I did not conquer Mount Everest. Nobody conquers Mount Everest. In this particular case, she lifted her skirt, we got lucky, and gave us it was a wonderful experience. Never been involved in politics prior to running for governor of New Mexico. I was completely outside of politics. I went and I introduced myself to John Latuzio, who was the chairman of the Republican Party, 2 weeks before I announced my candidacy for president. And you know what he says to me? He says, wow, man, I like you. I like what you've got to say. You know, the Republican Party, we're totally inclusive. We're going to include you in everything. All the debates, all the discussions. You can go to all the meetups. You can make your case to Republicans in this state as to why you should be governor. He said, but I got to tell you, Gary, you know, coming from completely outside of politics, there is no way that you're going to win. You might, you know, even if you win the Republican nomination, there's no way that you're going to win the governorship in a state that's 2-to-1 Democrat. But have at it. Well, I had at it, and I won. And I would like to think it was based... I'd like to think it was based on what I had to say, which was, I'm going to bring a common sense business approach to state government. Best product, best service, lowest price. I want to keep government out of the bedroom. I want to keep government out of making decisions in my life that only I should be making, so smaller government. In that context, I think I distinguished myself as governor of New Mexico for perhaps vetoing more legislation than the other 49 governors in the country combined. I vetoed 750 bills. I had thousands of line item vetoes. I took line item veto to a new art form. Only 2 of those bills were overridden, so it made a difference when it came to billions of dollars worth of spending. It made a difference when it came to legislation that, in my opinion, was just going to add time and money to our lives, wasn't going to make us any safer, wasn't going to make us any more healthy, it was just going to add time and money. I stood up to that and I said, no, we don't need that kind of legislation. Now, the ultimate arbiter of how this all worked out in New Mexico were the citizens of New Mexico. And in a state that was 2-to-1, is 2-to-1 Democrat, I got reelected by a bigger margin the second time than the first time. I just think it speaks volumes to the fact that people really do appreciate good stewardship of tax dollars. So 3 things have happened in the course of the last year a couple of polls and a study on all the presidential candidates. One was a poll on favorabilities of all the presidential candidates in their own states, his or her own state. There was only one presidential candidate viewed favorably in his or her own state, and that was me. Now, how does that work out in New Mexico? Well, in New Mexico, people wave at me with all 5 fingers, not just one. And then they came out with a study on which presidential candidate has the best record when it comes to jobs, job creation. Well, that was me. And here was my response to that then and when I was governor of New Mexico. I didn't create one single job as governor of New Mexico. The private sector creates jobs, but I did create an environment of certainty. I appointed the heads of all the agencies, I appointed the boards and commissions, I controlled all rules and regulations, and I want to suggest to you that rules and regulations got better on a daily basis with just a root in common sense. If it's going to take more time and more money to have to comply with government, not going to make us any safer, not going to make us any more healthy, why have it? So I brought that certainty to state government. Business went to bed knowing that things weren't going to get worse. And then lastly, and I think this is really important, the ACLU last December issued a report card on all of the presidential candidates. ACLU, group dedicated to the Constitution, a group dedicated to civil liberties, a group dedicated to the first 10 amendments of the Constitution, the Bill of Rights. 24 liberty torches was a perfect score. This is the ACLU last December. This is important. Mitt Romney, Rick Santorum, 0 liberty torches out of 24. Newt Gingrich, 4 liberty torches out of 24. Barack Obama, 16 liberty torches out of 24. Paul, 18 liberty torches out of 24. And Gary Johnson, 21 liberty torches out of 24. We are on the ballot in 47 states and the District of Columbia. We are litigated in the other 3 states. We believe that we're going to prevail. We'll see how that turns out. So although there are other third-party candidates, none of them come close to 50 state ballot access. I believe the Green Party is in 2nd place and that they're going to qualify on the ballot in 30 states. So when I talk about myself and my opponents, I'm talking about Mitt Romney and Barack Obama, because the 3 of us are going to be the only ones on the ballot in all 50 states. So what you're not going to hear in the debate on Wednesday night is, let's not bomb Iran. We're going to find ourselves with another 100 million enemies to this country that we wouldn't otherwise have, that these military interventions have consequences, and the consequences is that we're being vilified by the world as opposed to being looked at as the beacon on the hill. After 9/11, the largest demonstration in the world in support of the United States was in Tehran by over 1 million Iranians that showed up in support of the United States, and we're going to bomb Iran? I'm the only candidate on stage, I'm the only candidate, and this is what you're not going to hear on Wednesday night, that wants to get out of Afghanistan tomorrow and have resulted in hundreds of millions of enemies to this country that, but for those military interventions, arguably would not exist. I would be the only candidate on stage come Wednesday that believes in marriage equality, that believes that it is a constitutionally guaranteed right. I would be the only candidate on stage Wednesday night that believes we need to bring an end to the drug war, right now nationally on marijuana. Over 50% of Americans now support legalizing marijuana. Why is that the case? Well, it's because people are talking about it. And the more we talk about it, the more we recognize that this is absolutely the same as the prohibition of alcohol, that 90% of the drug problem is prohibition related, not use related. That is not to discount the problems with use and abuse, but that should be the focus. We need to stop arresting 1.8 million people a year in this country. We need to stop with the fact that we have 2.3 million people behind bars. We have the highest incarceration rate of any country in the world. That's on a per capita basis, and that's on a numbers basis. And for anybody that doesn't want to have their kids do drugs, you bet. But don't you want to deal with that as a family as opposed to the government coming in? If I were on the debate stage on Wednesday night, I would be the only candidate. Well, how does it work out if you have a president that vetoes legislation? How does that work out? Well, I would have vetoed the Patriot Act. I would have never established the Department of Homeland Security. I think it's and by extension, I would have never established TSA. Wednesday night, if I were on stage, I would be the only candidate that would not have signed the National Defense Authorization, which allows for arrest and detainment of you and I as U.S. citizens without being charged. This is why we fought wars. And then I'm the only candidate on Wednesday night, if I were on stage, that would be advocating a balanced budget now. Yeah. Not 30 years from now, not 28 years from now with an escalator for growth built into it. I would be advocating a $1.4 trillion reduction in federal spending, and guess what? That means having a raging debate and discussion over cutting Medicaid, Medicare, military spending. Social Security, absolutely savable. This is a problem that is pale in comparison to the ones that I just mentioned. But we should be having a raging debate in this country over how we cut Medicare. Because if we don't, we're going to find ourselves with no health care at all. The ramifications of what we are doing, borrowing and printing money to the tune of 43 cents out of every dollar that we spend, is going to result in a monetary collapse. And a monetary collapse, very simply, is when the dollars that we have in our pocket don't buy a thing because of the accompanying inflation that goes along with borrowing and printing that money. On Wednesday night, I would be the only candidate advocating eliminating income tax, corporate tax, abolishing the IRS, and replacing all of that with one federal consumption tax. In this case, I am embracing the fair tax. I really think it's the template. I really think it's the template to no tax, but it ends up being cost neutral over a short amount of time because it bleeds all existing federal tax out of goods and services. It's really the answer when it comes to American exports, making American exports 23% more competitive. It's the answer when it comes to China, and it's really the answer to jobs in this country, because with a zero corporate tax rate environment, if the private sector doesn't create tens of millions of jobs, I don't know what it takes to create tens of millions of jobs. And I see manufacturing jobs flocking back to the United States, given a zero corporate tax rate environment. I would be the only candidate on stage Wednesday night that would sign legislation that would abolish the Federal Reserve if given the opportunity. Job. Treasury prints money, they give it to the Federal Reserve. Federal Reserve gives it to the banks at 0%. Banks don't give it to us because they can buy up treasuries in a closed loop. And imagine what an audit of the Federal Reserve would be, how enlightening that would be, and how the nation would be able to recognize what a screw job this is. Crony capitalism is alive and well in this country. I think that implementing the fair tax issues pink slips to over half of Washington lobbyists because they're there to garner loopholes, and the loopholes are And then in conjunction with signing legislation that would eliminate the Fed, would be signing legislation. I'd be the only candidate that would sign legislation that would repeal legal tender laws and sign legislation allowing for competing currencies. Complex subject, but we're not going to leave that to the government. We're going to leave that to the private sector with competing currencies. Imagine having dollars that actually had a commodity base to it. So this is my criticism of Barack Obama. What comes out of Barack Obama's mouth, in my opinion, is just music. I liken it to a violin, man. He plays that violin, and everything that comes out of his mouth, I find it difficult to disagree with anything that comes out of his mouth. It's just that there is a total disconnect between what comes out of his mouth and the reality. And if you want to look at just medical marijuana, he made a promise that he would not crack down on medical marijuana facilities in this country where legislatures or citizens voted to implement those programs. And right now he is cracking down on these facilities in Colorado and California, and that's 180 degrees from what he promised. And he said so many things when it came to military intervention. And the last thing I figured is that he would have ever doubled down in Afghanistan. The last thing I would have ever figured is that he would be funding the insurgents in Syria. And by the way, quarter of the Syrian insurgents are Al-Qaeda. Haven't we done this before in Afghanistan? This is an unending story with our military interventions.
That's how you get a peace prize. I like that guy.
Mitt Romney in the second debate said, it's a no-brainer that we should build a fence across the border.
I don't know.
You are listening to someone who does not have one molecule of brain based on that statement. That would be an incredible waste of time and money. We should make it as easy as possible for someone that wants to come to this country and work to get a work visa. Not citizenship, but a work visa. Would immigrants stand in line if the line were moving to get a work visa? Absolutely. And a work visa should entail a background check, and a work visa should entail a social security card so that applicable taxes would get paid. We adopt the fair tax. Taxes are not an issue at all, because whether you're illegal, legal, a visitor to the United States, or a U.S. citizen, nobody is going to avoid being able to pay one federal consumption tax. And then Mitt Romney says, we need to balance the budget, but we need to hold Medicare intact and we need to increase spending for the military. It doesn't add up. I'm guessing that everybody here finished the second grade and was in mathematics. Equivalency that went along with getting out of the second grade. that to the entire country with a straight face.
Dishonesty!
Well, that's exactly what is reigning here. It's a wonderful position to be in, to just tell the truth on all these issues. Joe Hunter today said that this is the first political endeavor that he has ever associated with himself, that there is never anything that's off the record. Everything's on the record all the time because it's about the truth. That's what it's about. So what I get right now is this wasted vote. Why waste your vote? What is more of a wasted vote than voting for somebody that you don't believe in? That's how we change things in this country. That's how we change things. So I want to make a request of all of you, and that is, waste your vote. Waste your vote. Vote for me. And you know what happens then? I'm the next president of the United States. Thank all of you enough for taking your time to be here this evening. I believe that we're going to open this up to questions, comments, any insults that any of you have.
Do I go up there?
Yeah.
There's a microphone for yourself. Thank you so much. I've got this for you.
All right.
Johnson.
Thank you.
My name's Jacob Isbell. There's all kinds of young people. Lots of us already know that this is the future of it, because when some of the things that are on my mind constantly, some of the things that are on my mind constantly. Right now we've got going on in Afghanistan a failed policy. We don't have any words of criticism from the supposed opposition party. I want to know, you as an athlete who has gotten lucky with Mount Everest, what is your plan going forward from here? We realize you're up against Mount Everest. Right now the freedom movement's up against it. What's your plan to be able to keep this moving if it doesn't happen in 2012, because it's going to be that much more pertinent in every year that follows?
So going back to my running as a Republican for the presidency, I thought that it was going to really be hard to marginalize two candidates on stage talking about the same thing, myself, Ron Paul. I didn't find myself marginalized. I found myself being excluded, and very unfairly. I saw Ron Paul continue to be marginalized, and if Tampa Bay isn't an example of being marginalized, I don't know what is. I can't believe a place on the stage and the ability to talk. But that said, in December, I did not see Ron Paul being the Republican nominee, and this is way too important a movement to not have a spokesperson. Like I say, I recognize that all of you would be doing the same thing I'm doing right now if given the opportunity. I am trying to make the most out of this, but I also, as long as I'm relevant, I will continue this through 2016. For all of you, that beat your head up against the wall to try and change the Republican Party, I dare say that what you got is a bunch of knots on your head, changing over to the Libertarian Party, which really isn't a change. You know what? You don't have to change a thing. Nothing has to change.
Governor Johnson, we have a list of questions from Mount Vernon Academy. 5th and 6th graders submitted 11 questions.
Go for them.
Pick a number between 1 and 11.
7.
What will you do to help prevent diseases?
What will I do to help prevent diseases?
Like please.
So I am the free market guy, okay? I'm the free market guy. I'm the no tariff guy. So wouldn't it be wonderful if China came up with cures for the diseases that we have? I mean, this is the wonderful planet that we live in if we just allow the free market to actually function. So from a rules and regulations standpoint, I think we're denying a lot of research and development that ends up being tagged as research and development, and that it shouldn't move on. That ends up to be the FDAA. Look, we should unleash the powers that we have, and it's not governmental powers, it's our powers, it's our entrepreneurial drive, and in the case of research and development, it's the people that look into these diseases and should be given all the opportunity to be able to find out these cures and to actually implement them. And you and I, as citizens that may contract these diseases, why do we have to have government okay to be able to take drugs that might be available on an experimental basis? We ought to be able to take them.
Yeah.
Gary, my name is Ken Larson. I'm the candidate for governor of Utah, and if I get elected, I'm going to need you, and I'm going to ask for a lot of help from you. I agree with you 100%. I just have this question. I believe that if all the people in America who are qualified to vote checked out the candidates and voted what they really believe, you would win by a landslide. What do you think of that idea?
I believe it. I don't know if all of you have seen isidewith.com, but 3.6 million people have now gotten online, isidewith.com, taken a 36-question questionnaire. You get paired up with the presidential candidate most in line with your views. I believe as of yesterday, Barack Obama has 330 electoral votes. I have 230. Mitt Romney has 0. But here then is my rub with Barack Obama. What he says and what he writes are complete disconnect between the actions. And I want to suggest to all of you, there is no disconnect between what I'm saying and what I'm going to doggedly pursue as President of the United States.
And an anarcho-capitalist libertarian. The non-aggression principle and a non-interventionist foreign policy are very important to me. Under what circumstances would President Johnson go to war?
Well, if we were attacked, and it would start out with congressional approval.
Yeah.
That's a good answer.
First of all, I appreciate the fact that you want to carry this through to 2016, but assuming that you don't win this year, I don't think that we have that long to wait to balance the budget. What percentage of the vote would you need to allow for ballot access for libertarian senators and congressmen in 2014?
Rounded off, that's 5% nationally. So 5% nationally, everybody has ballot access on the libertarian ticket. And don't discount a terrific showing in November to change the way that the eventual winner does actually govern. That maybe I show that it's safe ground to talk about a balanced budget and a $1.4 trillion reduction in federal spending that includes Medicaid, Medicare, and military spending.
Thanks.
Governor, I'm a native New Mexican. I was actually in elementary school, and I can remember defending you from one of my status teachers. Who This isn't really a question, but I am a combat veteran. I served as a Marine in Afghanistan. Who served and who supported Ron Paul and donated generously to help him end the war. Thank you so much for having a sound foreign policy and being willing to stand with the troops and get us out of that mess.
Thank you. Thank you.
First, I'd like to say thank you so much for coming to Utah. I've been a fan of you for a long time. As you can probably know, it's kind of hard to be, going to college. And it seems like costs have risen more under Obama, and the money that I'm making my minimum wage job is worth less and less. What would you do to make it easier to be a college student?
Well, I think that we should recognize why college tuition is so high, and that is because of guaranteed government student loans. Guaranteed student loans did not exist. I guarantee you that higher education would drop dramatically the costs for tuition, because they want to fill up their classrooms, and right now they're immune from having to do that. I mean, this is, you know, you as a student, I am sorry that you're going to graduate from college with a home mortgage with no home, and this is getting worse, not better. And of course, you look at college tuitions, and you're making a value judgment. Gee, I really don't want to go to college if it's going to be this much a semester. And your friends and your family and everybody says, yeah, but you can get a guaranteed student loan, so go do it.
Thank you so much.
The unintended consequence of government.
Thank you for coming. I am a hardcore libertarian, and I believe in the free market, but certain things I'm afraid of being privatized. For example, you mentioned earlier, we have the highest incarceration rate of any first world country. I think a lot of that is due to, number one, the drug laws, and number two, privatization of prisons. They make more money when more people are incarcerated. I just want to know how you feel about privatization of prisons.
Well, I privatized half the state prisons in New Mexico, and here's how that story went down. Was when I took office, we had over 600 prisoners housed out of state. The federal courts were running the prisons in New Mexico. They had for decades because of a riot. So what I'm about to tell you is an apples to apples comparison, because the federal courts were running the prisons in New Mexico. Private prisons so we had established costs, and the established costs were $100, I'm going to round off here, but the established costs were $100 a day for every single prisoner. The private prisons were going to do the same goods and services for $66 as opposed to $100. I thought that was really good government, and I will tell you, I saw no lobbying of any sort by the private prisons to actually increase incarceration. And I always said in New Mexico that if we would adopt rational drug policy, it would be a lot easier to shut down the private prisons than it would be the public prisons. And let me just point to California and Prop 19, where the largest opposition, the biggest opposition to legalizing marijuana in California, the last election cycle, was the public prison union. So I think good government is better products, better service at lower prices. I think good government is same product, same service at lower prices.
It's a long walk up here. So, I don't know, I've been thinking a lot about, bringing jobs into America and stuff. And as far as lessening taxes and stuff on corporation, I think that is good. But I've been thinking a lot about our minimum wage laws that we have right now. And thinking about it, you look at some other economies and they're a lot more competitive than we are because they don't actually maintain the same minimum wage laws we have. If you take a look at the inflation rates that we have in America compared to some other countries, it doesn't necessarily make sense. And from the freedom aspect, I take a look at the rights of the corporation and the rights of the person. I think back in the 1920s there was an issue with the corporations abusing the rights of the individual people, but I think now it's gone a little bit far the other way. I think that with the minimum wage laws as high as they are, what tends to happen is you get overpaid workers because, from my experience, personal experience, not every worker in my, where I've worked has even deserved minimum wage. I mean, you have a guy that's over there, should I have the right as a corporation to be able to pay somebody what they actually, worked for?
No, I completely agree with you. I completely agree with you that minimum wage is not a living wage, it's a minimum wage. And it allows a lot of people to start out in the workplace that wouldn't ordinarily have those benefits. And I just want to share with you some of the things that I've been able to say regarding the minimum wage, which is what I just said, and regarding living wage. In Santa Fe, they passed an ordinance that that established a living wage of $9.50 an hour. And I was asked for my reaction. And my reaction was, why did you stop at $9.50? Why didn't you just go right to $75 an hour? Why not? I mean, well, obviously, somebody's got to pay for it. Well, it just doesn't work. Government doesn't work establishing minimum wage.
Well, so my question is what actions would you plan on taking as far as allowing a little bit of buying power from both sides? Because if you take a look at the value of our dollar today, you realize, just looking no further than the value of nickels, the melting value of our nickels is actually higher than the face value right now. 5.4%, sorry, the melting value of a nickel is 5.4 cents.
Well, and a penny costs what, 1.28 cents to
Well, and
produce?
you take a look at that, and how is having a minimum wage, you know, with the current laws that we have, how's that really helped our inflation rates?
No, I
You know, taking a look at the comparison of the dollar. So what would you do to allow buying power from both sides so you would have a fair wage, you know, on both sides?
Well, what I'm halfway hearing you say is that what government are you going to implement to establish this? Well, none. The notion of
One question.
Established government, I'm saying lessen some of the regulations on minimum wage, because technically, if you look at it, it's a really one-sided equation.
Sure.
Only one party has buy-in.
Yeah, and how did that work out as governor of New Mexico? How does it work out when you have a governor or a president that's going to veto things? Well, I vetoed minimum wage legislation that would have raised minimum wage legislation.
I'm primarily concerned about the financial sector. So like we were saying about audit and Fed. My question is concerned with too big to fail. In 2008, the concentration of wealth in the banks on Wall Street was around $6 trillion, and now it's about 8.7 trillion. So it's gotten much bigger in the past 4 years, and I prefer not to see a bailout again. But what would you do about the problem of too big to fail?
Well, nobody's too big to fail. I would have never authorized a bailout. Doing this in a vacuum. There are a lot of free market economists that have hitched. One of the downsides to being who I am, and that is I represent a lot of really, really smart people that by default, what comes out of my mouth is representative of them. So I'm talking now about all my free market economist friends that without exception believe that the system would not have failed if there would have been no bailouts, that the great travesty was that none of these financial institutions were rewarded with failure. They should have lost the money, and that should have been the consequence.
Hi, thank you so much for coming and doing this. I actually came with my fiance, and she was so excited to see you. She actually wrote up a question, but she got a little nervous when we got here in the crowd, so I'm reading it for her.
That takes guts.
I know your position relative to foreign policy is non-interventional, and that you want to focus on your own borders, our own borders, and bring our troops home now. My support for you and for Ron Paul is largely for that position. I believe your position, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is also to stop all foreign aid as we are suffering economically here at home and need those funds for ourselves. My question relates a bit to these issues from an economic and military standpoint, but expands a bit to foreign policy issues I personally have not heard discussed thus far. Today, we continue to send money, military technology, and weapons, troops, and training to Israel. Today, the government of Israel is making a big deal about Iran